Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. All right, so the Browns are looking for an offensive coordinator again. And since we did this last year, this is not something new for Browns fans. But the reason they're looking for an offensive coordinator is much different than it was last year, right? The Browns are in a completely different place this offseason than they were last year. It almost feels like it wasn't a year ago how different of a place that they're in. But they're still looking for an offensive coordinator. And I want to make sure that I do something that I did last year when it comes to this, right? I think it's easy to get caught up with names when you're talking about offensive coordinator. Like, you say a name, you say that name enough, you fall in love with the ideal of having that name on your roster. And then that becomes exactly what you want for the offensive coordinator job. But to me, that's a job about the process. That's a job about reaching an end goal. So it's more important to talk about what you want a offensive coordinator hire to achieve, what you want an offensive coordinator to have in their tool set versus the specific names of guys, because at the end of the day, we're picking guys off of list of passing game coordinators and quarterbacks coach and guys who've been offensive coordinators for maybe a year or so. We don't know much about what these guys could do in this role, and we don't have much information to really project, given how, trying to evaluate what a coach does in a coaching staff, much different than a player does, right? There's no all 22 for the sidelines of the NFL. You can't tell, like, specifically who's doing what, who's making what suggestion during the game week, and henceforth all of that stuff. So not as much information to go off of when it comes to the prospects of these specific coaches. Way more information to go off of what we know that the Browns need to add to their offense. And when I look at the Cleveland Browns, they look like a team that erased their own identity this season, right? They wanted their identity to be that they have a great quarterback and that Deshaun Watson was that great quarterback. That was the game plan coming into 2024, was that our identity will be that our quarterback's awesome. That plan blew up in your face. Deshaun Watson was not just bad, but since you gave him the keys to the offense, his bad had no floor, right? That was part of the risk of building the offense around Deshaun Watson. You were going to be as good as Deshaun Watson was. And if he was lights out, the offense would have been lights out. But since he was not lights out, the offense took a dip and did not stop falling. And when you put backups in, it was too untethered for you to rein in some of the wilder tendencies of the guys that you had backing up. DTR threw a lot of interceptions. Jameis Winston threw a lot of interceptions. This was the natural consequence of building a system around Deshaun Watson, and then Deshaun Watson not being able to live up to having a system built around him. And I want to make sure that point is clear. Sometimes we get into the habit of saying, hey, we need to build a system around the quarterback, and we think that's automatically a good thing. Like, if the Browns draft Shedeur Sanders, if they draft Cam Ward, we're going to have the same conversations about building the offense around the skill sets of whoever it is that you draft. But sometimes structure is a good thing, right? Like, sometimes a quarterback having to play in the structure of a offense is a good thing instead of it just being free-formed around them. And I think this year provides a good example of why that could be a good thing. It provides you a little bit more of a floor. It makes it so that you can develop a quarterback into doing stuff that maybe they're not used to. I think that's what the Browns want to get back to. They want to get back to the bread and butter of what Kevin Stefanski got hired off of, the bread and butter of what Kevin Stefanski got 2 of his Coach of the Year awards on, the bread and butter of what got a lot of these guys on the offense extended, which is wide zone, Kubiak style offense. That's what they want to go back to. So any offensive coordinator hire they have is going to have to be able to elevate that style of offense, because that is what the Browns need to get back to, right? Twin tight end sets, play action heavy, run game, wide zone stuff. get them up and moving. This is what the Browns need. Somebody who has a good grasp of this. Maybe they're young enough to add some new elements to it. But that's what they need to go after. Offensively, the Browns have a lot of different goals to accomplish, but the main goal, if they're trying to be competitive next year, has to be how do we make our run game a threat again? Like, our run game has not been a threat for a very long time, or at least for the last couple of years. We need to make it a threat again, right? We need to figure out a way to do that. And the truth is, even in 2023, yeah, Nick Chubb was out, but the run game wasn't what it needed to be. And that is something that they need to address. That's why I don't think it's just as simple as going back to that old thing, right? And just setting all the pieces back where they were and thinking that's going to run and be great. No, you got to make sure that you're adding elements to it, evolving the offense as much as reverting the offense back to the bread and butter of what Stefanski does well. So who do you want to bring in? I think you want to bring in somebody who has a bit of a track record of showing you that they can be innovative, maybe somebody on the younger side of the offensive coordinator game, somebody who can bring new ideas while still working in the framework of the Kubiak-style offense that Kevin Stefanski has cut his teeth in. That is the template for me for offense, right? Like, the Browns need to build up the run game. They need to run twin tight end again. They need to do wide zone. They need to get these guys in a position to do things that they were brought in to do, this roster offensively into a position to be what they were brought in to be, and that is within the framework of Kevin Stefanski's offense, but also somebody who could be an offensive coordinator who can add new things while also not straying too far away from the principles of the offense. Basically, it needs to not feel like the Browns are running two offenses anymore. And that's kind of what 2024 felt like at times, is that we were running two different offenses. They need to add some new elements without it feeling like we're just trying to Frankenstein this thing together, which means you need more cohesion with the offensive coordinator and the head coach when it comes to the stylistic backgrounds that they come from, right? So who are the coaches on the market that fit that description? First guy is a guy that you're going to hear a lot because he was in the running to be offensive coordinator last year, or at least we all thought that there was a chance that he'd be in there. Now it makes a ton of sense. And we talk about Kubiak-style offense. I mean, it's no wonder this guy's name comes up. Clint Kubiak, related to Gary Kubiak, who is the mentor of Kevin Stefanski. These two have worked together in the past. Kevin, Clint, very familiar with each other. Both keep in contact, regular contact, obviously, with Gary Kubiak. This would make sense. Clint has been really innovative, I think, especially in the run game. If you remember when the Browns played the Saints, they were very creative with how they used Taysom Hill specifically in the run game and how they ran the ball against the Cleveland Browns. A lot of delayed handoffs, a lot of trick plays, like very creative stuff there. Now, the Saints weren't able to have a great season this year. That's why everybody got fired. But they had a better season than you would expect the Saints to have. Also, I was pretty impressed with some of the work that he's done with Spencer Rattler. No, Spencer Rattler doesn't look like an amazing quarterback to me, but I think he got more out of Spencer Rattler in his rookie year than I would have expected if Spencer Rattler had to play out of his rookie year. There seems like to be enough overlap with Kevin Stefanski where you're not going to run into the same problem that you had with Ken Dorsey, where just the overlap ended up being too broad, and it caused issues, especially with getting the play calling, getting guys set. This is going to be familiar enough for everybody to where you're not going to have those concerns. The question with Clint Kubiak is, one, this would be a lateral move for him, so he has to become available. Are the Saints going to let him go? Because they couldn't just decide not to. Just because the Saints don't have a head coach right now does not mean that they can't retain Clint Kubiak. This has been done before, right, with many different coordinators where a team decides, hey, we're keeping Clint, we're hiring a coach. That coach has to be fine with keeping Clint. That could very well be the situation in New Orleans. It's not a guarantee at all, not even close to a guarantee at all, that the Saints decide to let him go. He's a promising young offensive coordinator. Like, the way people talk about him is similar to how people were talking about a guy like Kyle Shanahan not a couple of years ago, but like a decade or two ago. I feel old as fuck. Oh my God. But the way that people are talking about Clint kind of reminds me of how people used to talk about Kyle Shanahan back in 2012, right? Before Shanahan was like a well-established name, but he was the guy who was helping develop RG3. He has similar vibes around him. And the last name helps. I think the Saints will probably try to hang on to him as hard as possible, because they see him as a part of what they want to build. And if you're going to fire your coach and you're going to switch to an interim, you're probably going to want to keep some level of continuity. This is who they're probably going to try to hang on to keep that level of continuity. And it does sound like Clint wants to stay in the Saints organization from all reports and everything I can read coming out of New Orleans. So Clint Kubiak would be a great selection. 1, not available. 2, not sure he's going to be available. And 3, if he is available, there are some questions about, would he want play calling responsibility? Is this a job that he's going to want at this point in his career where he's a bit more established? He spent years on offensive coordinator. Does he want to go somewhere with a team that has an established quarterback? Or does he want to go with somebody and work with somebody who he has had success working with before and familiarity with? That part's a toss-up. The other 2 questions, a little bit harder there, right? So that's Clint Kubiak, his prospects at this job. Josh McCown is an interesting name because I have no clue what it is that Josh McCown does or does not do. All I know is that people really like Josh McCown. Like, the personality seems to be fire from Josh McCown. Every step he's gone, everywhere he's played as a player, everywhere he's coached, people tend to have a high opinion of Josh McCown. He's known as the guy in Carolina that wanted CJ Stroud. They took Bryce Young, right? So he doesn't get any of that dirt on his hands. Then he goes over to Minnesota, and then he's part of this revitalization of Sam Darnold's career to an extent that none of us thought was possible with Sam Darnold. So his resume as a quarterback's coach, pretty strong, right? Not a ton of things there. Again, it's hard to get evidence that that a quarterback's coach is good because, like, how do you judge that? And everybody's going to have a different bar of judging that. But if you look at it, he was the guy who wanted to bring in CJ Stroud. That ended up being a smart move. He was also the guy who helped elevate Sam Darnold's career. He's kind of been always talked about as a future coach. My question about Josh McCown is this. He's only spent 2 years as coach. Is he ready for a coordinator job? Like, and are the Cleveland Browns, the way that they're set up, the infrastructure of this coaching staff, are they prepared to bring in somebody who has never been a high-level assistant coach to that role? Like, do they have the infrastructure to teach Josh McCown all the things he needs to be an offensive coordinator? I could see it working. I could see it being a mess. The talent is there. People love the personality of Josh McCown, but there are some question marks about projecting him in only his 3rd year as a coach to become an offensive coordinator, which I do think is a little bit more of a more difficult on a technical level transition, being a quarterback's coach to being an offensive coordinator than being a quarterback's coach and being a head coach. Because if you're a head coach, you can be one of these head coaches who aren't really involved with like the schematic game planning and the strategic side of the game. A lot of those head coaches exist. A lot of those head coaches have success. Some of them don't. But Josh McCown would definitely fit that role. Offensive coordinator is a very technical position, and that's where you get nervous about promoting somebody who's only had 2 years as a coach into such a technical position, because even if the person is a perfect fit personality-wise, even if you believe in a person, there's going to be a lot of growing pains in that fast of a transition to that technical of a job there, right? Like, and if Josh thinks he's ready and Josh wants to take the job as the offensive coordinator for Cleveland Browns, it could work. It's just a question, and something you have to be concerned about coming into it is 2 years as a quarterback's coach, not a ton of years as a coach overall. He's been a player for a very long time, which does it's like relevant experience for sure. He's played in like so many different offenses, but is he ready for that elevation as a coach to coordinator? That is a little bit of a more difficult question to answer. Maybe the Browns are looking for a passing game coordinator. They're looking for a passing game coordinator. I think he can work there as a passing game coordinator. They're looking for an offensive coordinator. I think you got to ask questions about the projection there. Doesn't mean that Josh can't do it. Just, is Josh ready for it at this point in his career? Another name that's gotten brought up, Alex Van Pelt. I think this is the one name in the Browns' back pocket where it's like, hey, if we can't get anybody we want, we'll go back to Alex, because Kevin is ultimately super familiar with him. Everybody in the locker room super familiar with him. It would be the most C+ hire of all time, in my opinion. I wouldn't be thrilled or doing backflips over bringing back Alex Van Pelt. I think he has his own issues. I think him and Kevin really struggled to elevate this offense or to add new things to this offense when they were together previously. But what they do well and what they can master is just what the bread and butter is of this offense, right? They will go back to that stuff. And if they get a quarterback who can run that system, they will have reasonable success there. They won't elevate. You won't see much new. You're not going to see a lot of innovation out of it, or a lot of growth out of that base style that they like to do. But you do know at the end of the day, he's a competent coach who's going to be able to get you where you need to get to. And that's not always guaranteed. So I think that's going to be who's in their back pocket. We're all familiar with Alex Van Pelt, good or bad. That's why I think he's in their back pocket. The guy that I think, and I've said this going all the way back to the middle of the season, and somebody can dig up the clip, but I remember bringing this up. I thought if Ken Dorsey got fired, it's very likely they promote from within, and the guy they're going to promote from within is Tommy Rees. Why Tommy Rees? He's the guy that makes the most sense to me, right? We talked about all these other guys and the pros and cons of bringing them in if they'll be available. Clint Kubiak, right? Makes a lot of sense. Has the experience that you need. Wouldn't be a huge projection to bring him over to be an offensive coordinator. But the question with Clint Kubiak, will he be available? Josh McCown, personality fit, right? Perfect for that. But does he have the experience? He's only been a quarterback's coach the last 2 years. He hasn't been a pass game coordinator. He hasn't been a run game specialist. He hasn't had to coordinate the game at a wider level outside of what, maybe high school, where he was a head coach, and who knows if he was doing the coordination there. So that makes me out on Josh McCown, or at least a little wary on Josh McCown, right? Like, maybe they can teach him these things, maybe they can't. It's a toss-up. Alex Van Pelt would be a solid hire, would be a C+ hire. But the problem with Alex Van Pelt is you're not going to add much to your offense, right? The other two guys we mentioned, young guys, they're going to add something to that Kubiak style. They're going to add a new flavor to it. We've seen the new flavors that Alex Van Pelt brings to this offense. Those flavors are like, let's put a center as running back in shotgun, right? Like, I know we have been fed up with whatever happened this year with the offense, but please do not forget, my man Alex Van Pelt had a center, Nick Harris, out there in the gun as his innovation. So, like, I'm not very confident that we're going to be able to bring in the innovation that we need to bring in to this Kubiak style offense with somebody like Alex Van Pelt. Will you be able to get back to where you were? Yes. Will you be able to get fast where you were? I don't know. And I want the Browns to get better, not just to be decent like they were in 2023. So that, to me, is the big problem there. Then you get Tommy Rees. He has experience within the building. He's a young coach, only 32 years old, has innovated within this system, right? Coached at Alabama as the offensive coordinator, was also the offensive coordinator for Notre Dame. There was a bit of a bidding war for him at the end of the 2022 season. This guy, every step of the way, seems to be highly sought after by some big names in coaching, right? He almost got the North Carolina job. This is somebody that, it's rumored that Mike Vrabel would want to bring with him if he gets a job. Tommy Rees seems to be an up-and-comer in the coaching ranks. He's also experienced. This is a guy who's a pass game specialist for the Browns right now and a tight ends coach for the Browns right now. He's been an offensive coordinator at high-level programs in college football, Alabama, Notre Dame. So there's not a huge worry about projecting him to be a coordinator super early in his career and not as big as a learning curve for him. This would be his first offensive coordinator job in the NFL. But I think it's a good first offensive coordinator job for somebody in the NFL because you're not going to be thrust into all of the responsibility of the offense. He will have Kevin Stefanski there to help him. I think this is who ends up being the Browns offensive coordinator if he does indeed want to take the job. He might have opportunities elsewhere, and that might push him to different places. Look, the fact is the Browns' job right now is not super attractive. We don't have a quarterback. Our offensive line is old. Our running back is a free agent, and he's older. He got hurt. Like this on paper, this is not the most attractive job in the world. So the Browns might have a problem bringing in a candidate, right? Especially somebody like Clint Kubiak or any up and comer. Like it might be an issue. You might have to end up with Alex Van Pelt. But I think Tommy Rees is probably who they want to go after. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.